de bijdrage die we met jullie willen delen en willen laten zien van de volgende persoon. Mooie energie denk ik ook om op door te gaan. Want de volgende bijdrage die is van een bijzondere spreker, voormalig CEO van Unilever en schrijver van het boek Net Positive. Laten we luisteren naar de bijdrage van Polman.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Polman, the former CEO of Unilever and the author of a new book called Net Positive: How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take. First of all, I want to thank you and the Impact Economy Foundation, the VNO-NCW, as well as the City of Amsterdam for hosting the Nationale Conferentie for the Brede Welvaart. It couldn't come at a more appropriate time. It's an honor to be speaking to you, and I apologize not being with you in person, but unfortunately, I have to be in the Far East. There's no doubt that we live in a challenging environment and that things are getting tougher, be it the geopolitical situation, the effects of our planetary boundaries and climate change, or the ever-growing inequality. These are huge challenges, but I would argue also probably some of the biggest opportunities that we have in the history of mankind. Yes, we find ourselves in a delicate moment, and yes, the world is in trouble. COVID has taught us some things that I think are important, reminding ourselves of. First of all, the complexities of our system and the interrelationships, the destruction of biodiversity, our human health, inequality, the racial dimensions, the links to the overall economy. It is all related. We've seen, above all, that we can't have infinite growth on a finite planet, and anything we can do forever is by definition unsustainable. COVID has also reminded us that we can't have healthy people on an unhealthy planet. Nor can we continue to optimize within a system that is not designed to deliver anymore. We really have to drive the broader systems changes to get the results we are seeking. We've realized that first and foremost, we are citizens of planet Earth, and that when it comes to issues of biodiversity destruction, human health, climate change, inequality, or conflict prevention, we're better off working together than trying to close our boundaries and doing it alone. Partnerships and the broader systems change are needed. Just protecting the status quo or keeping our heads in the sand, like certain people are able to do, certainly won't get us there. To some extent, I have to confess that I'm happy that so many things are broken. In the financial crisis, we missed the opportunity to right-size our economies and move to a greener and more inclusive economy. At that time, people felt that banks were too big to fail and people were too small to matter. We now have a chance to not miss that opportunity and take the right changes. And we're off to a good start. Since COVID, we've seen more governments making net zero climate commitments. The European Green Deal setting new standards that we've never seen before, standards that rapidly are becoming global standards. The business community, where 1/3 or $37 trillion have made commitments to the science-based targets to be net zero by 2050. The financial community, take the Global Financial Alliance on Net Zero that was launched in Glasgow, $130 trillion of money under management, making commitments to decarbonize their portfolios. But what I am excited about is the rallying cry from the citizens of this world, increasingly the Gen Zs or the millennials demanding the changes, often expressed as well by the employees of our companies, willing to walk out if companies take positions that might be considered less than responsible. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the vision. It's called the Sustainable Development Goals, approved by 193 countries in the US. Increasingly not only becoming a moral imperative, but increasingly the most attractive business opportunity. We have the technologies to get there. And yes, we have the financial and economic arguments and incentives to move as well. In fact, I would argue we're at a moment in history where the cost of not acting is actually higher than the cost of acting. COVID has cost us $17 trillion to date in Europe and the US to save lives and livelihoods. Infinitely more, I would argue, than what it would have cost us to protect biodiversity in the first place. On climate change, Deloitte just issued a study that shows that if we don't take action and stay on the current trend, and likely then end up above 3-degree warming, we would incur a cost of $178 trillion by 2050 onwards. However, if we bend that curve and get closer to 1.5 degrees, we could turn that into a benefit of $43 trillion. We now need the willpower, to be honest. Many would argue that this is not a crisis of climate change or food insecurity or inequality. After all, they are the symptoms. I would argue that this is a crisis of greed, of apathy, or selfishness. But yet, over and over, it feels to me increasingly absurd, or actually surreal, as I argued in a recent article in Harvard Business Review, that we still today have to justify investing in our own survival. That's why I'm so pleased that you've embraced the work of George Sarafin and many others that has been done at Harvard behind the weighted impact accounts, where George looks at thousands of companies and ranks them by industry and finds that the companies that are more aggressively attacking the negative externalities like climate change or water or destruction of biodiversity, that the companies that more aggressively attack these negative externalities are actually higher valued by the market. So what some people might see as non-material or hard to measure factors like social or human or environmental capital is actually increasingly by the smart part of our financial market taken into account. In fact, Just Capital, the organization in the US that looks at a more morally conscious business model, was looking at companies that put a stronger purpose forward, work multi-stakeholder, longer-term business models, put sustainability at the core of what they do, that these companies saw a 7% higher return on equity and a 56% higher return on shareholder value in the last 5 years alone. As I said, we're moving. We don't need to spend too much time on that anymore. If you're not convinced yourself, legislation will force you, or otherwise the signals of the marketplace. But unfortunately, we're not moving at the speed and scale that is needed. And this is why we wrote the book Net Positive, How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take. We simply wanted to reframe what good looks like. If I put it very simple, this wonderful world is 4.6 billion years old. If I put it at a scale of 46 years, human beings have only been here for 4 hours. The Industrial Revolution only started 1 minute ago. And in that 1 minute, we destroyed half of the world's forests. This year, July 28th, is the day that we call World Overshoot Day, that we use up more resources than the world can replenish. I would argue that every day after that, we're actually stealing from future generations. So it is about us going back within the planetary boundaries and not living well beyond the planetary boundaries. Yet most companies are still in the CSR, corporate social responsibility mode. If you look at the sustainability reports issued now by 92% of the companies, it talks about less plastics in the oceans, less carbon emission in the air, less deforestation in our value chain. But ladies and gentlemen, when we have overshot our planetary boundaries to such an extent, less bad is simply not good enough. Less bad is still bad. I used to murder 5 people. Now I murder 3 people. I'm not a better murderer. So we need to move our mindsets from CSR, corporate social responsibility, to what I call RSC, responsible social corporations. Even a net zero or sustaining model is not good enough. The current system clearly isn't working. The only thing that works is to think regenerative, restorative, reparative. And that is what we call net positive. Companies that increasingly start to embrace that are getting the benefits of it. Companies that continue to deny it are increasingly heading to the graveyard of dinosaurs. So if being green is about doing less damage and sustainability about being net zero, then net positive is actually about making things better. In our book, we ask 2 very simple questions. How can you profit from solving the world's problems, not creating the world's problems? And is the world better off because your company is in it? Yes or no? For us, net positive companies are the companies that first and foremost take responsibility of their total impact in the world, all consequences, intended or not. Still, too many companies think they can outsource their value chain and also outsource their responsibilities. It simply doesn't work anymore. Net positive companies operate for the long-term benefit of business and society. In fact, they want a positive return for all of their stakeholders. They understand the importance of shareholder value but see it as a result of what they do, not as a myopic goal. And last but not least, they actually work and participate in driving the broader systems changes that we need. Is it easy? Obviously it isn't. The road of change is full of skeptics and cynics, and I've met a fair share of those, if I may say. But we do need to set the bar higher to get where we want to be. We do need to have the broader societal changes, starting with our own changes, our company changes at the roots of that, working together on these transformative partnerships with other industries, with civil society, with governments, to ultimately put the right frameworks in place, rules, laws, and regulations, as you want to drive us into this direction of what the Sustainable Development Goals advocate for, this more sustainable, inclusive world now and for generations to come, to not leave anybody behind. Because in all of this, I want to end where I started, that this first and foremost is a leadership crisis, that we need more courageous leaders. It takes courage to take responsibility of your total impact in the world. It takes courage to set targets that science tells us are needed, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable. It takes courage to work with others and sometimes have to compromise. And indeed, it takes courage to work with governments from time to time. I hope you agree on that. But ultimately, it starts with ourselves. Next to the moral imperative of driving the changes, this is now also the biggest business opportunity. Biggest business opportunity that requires the best of you, each of you individually, and hopefully with events like today, collectively. It was Rumi, a poet from the 13th century in Iran, who said it very well when he said, "Yesterday I was smart, I tried to change the world. Today I am wise and trying to change myself." Lots of luck with the conference. Thank you for all that you are doing. Thanks for setting the standards. Have fun whilst you're together. Hopefully get some crazy, discontinuous big ideas. Above all, be safe, enjoy reading the book, and I look forward to seeing you in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.